Hey everyone, today I wanted to share with you a new game that I stumbled upon, Tlatoani. It's a Aztec themed city builder where you take the helm of, well, a Mexica leader or a Mesoamerican leader and build out your city in the Valley of Mexico and the surroundings. It's really awesome and I wanted to share with you some tutorials today. The game so far is set to be released on October 31st. Right now, if you do want to check it out, there is a prologue available for free, some tutorials included and all that. And today, what I wanted to do is show you a bit around the menu, what you can expect, and then a bit of a highlight of my first playthrough. So right off the bat from the main menu page, I do want to give credit to the awesome art that really sets you in the mood for city building in the Mesoamerican world. As for playing, there's a variety of ways to do it. There is, for instance, a campaign which actually follows the story of the Mexica as they arrive into the Valley of Mexico and are going to be trying to interact with their neighbors, not be squashed, but eventually rise over top of them and form presumably the Triple Alliance. But I haven't gotten too far. This is the first campaign that gets started, and this will be expanded upon with the full game for a campaign there. Beyond that, you can play scenarios. So in the first case here, you'll see that you'll have access to 3 different scenarios. These are what we'll be playing through a little bit of today. And then beyond that, there are more specific incarnations of the map that you can play with that highlight different features. So this one is going to be high aridity, this one is more tranquil, a little bit easy, you're pretty well defended, and then this one is another one which has more potential rivals for you to play with, a lot of neighbors to interact with. And then finally, there's going to be a random map if you just want to play and freeball it. So let's dive right into things. This is going to be an example of a Mesoamerican city that I developed in the course of the prologue, and I'm going to give you some basics. The rest of this video will be showing how I built this city, but for now I just wanted to give you an intro to the game itself. So the first thing to note is going to be the art style. I think it's really pretty, but there are some nuances here. This is clearly an isometric game, so you can see I move around, and then all the tiles are going to be grid based. So don't expect something that's super detailed on a 3D perspective. Things are quite simplified visually. And so you can see it's going to be little sprites for characters, but you'll notice the second that you can click on some of these, they all have, native names. They all have high details, what they're doing, their interactions, bonds, duties, skills, professions. They can level up. So on the surface, the art style looks quite basic, but there is a whole lot going on under the hood here. Just to give you acquainted in terms of what you'd expect, at a high level, it has all the features of simulation city builders. You can look on, different visibilities for irrigation, where are your deposits of goods and resources, and then all sorts of stuff about how is your city doing, what's too crowded, what services are being used, etc. So really, really detailed, a lot of good functionality built in. And then on top of that, let's go over the kind of major parts of the game. So major resources are going to be timber, clay, and stone, and then maize, among other food products that you'll be getting. And as you'd expect, the kind of loop is to build centers like sawyers or stone quarries that are going to go into nature and collect those resources. Those resources then get pooled into these porter yards where you have all sorts of controls over pooling those resources. And the porter yards are going to be important because you have staff who help redistribute goods. So there's going to be local nodes to pool those. Those can then be sent to other places. So markets, for instance, will pull from these local pooling of centers, and they will serve as places to then redistribute your goods to the neighborhood. So they're going to get food and other products that you're doing. The other place that goods that you're producing can go is going to be into these trading posts. Trading posts have all sorts of controls, and mostly this is going to be about exporting to other city-states. And so there is a map view here of the basin of Mexico Valley, and there'll be a bunch of other city-states. Here you can see one of my trade groups coming back and forth from the cities. This is only the prologue, so it's a bit limited, but if you play a full scenario, you'll have access to a lot more city-states. And then looking at any one of these, you can see what they want to import and what you can get from them. And there's different preferences, there's trade rates. With these cities, you can not only do trade, but capture and conquer them. So a lot to be doing on that map. So that's all about getting goods and producing them. A little bit of industry down here is going to be my clay pits that are going to be then combined together into, take clay, take timber, fire it, make pottery. That can be stored here and moved out. So that's all about kind of like goods and managing those. And then there's going to be the creature needs of your various individuals. So here you can see my houses. They will mature and evolve over time. This is a small house. as it gets its needs met and it gets matured with just the years, it'll get larger and larger, have a greater household, hold more goods, do a lot more stuff. And so to meet those needs, you have to do all kinds of things. So one of them is I've built a huge cistern network to bring in fresh water. It then brings it over to this basin. The basin then has plumbing that goes through the roads out to the various structures. I can then extend that through to this other cistern, again, another basin, and then more plumbing to go these routes. You can also move water in from the swamps to irrigate your farms. And then there's all kinds of other creature needs for diversions like plazas, for religious aspects. There's education. So this is a school. You can then collect taxes. The taxes get coinage for your money here. And then that gold can actually be going into goldsmiths who can produce fine goods. And so you can see the levels of complexity all layered one on top of each other. And on top of that, there is this interesting feature about symmetry built into the game, where a lot of the times when you build big temples and structures, they get bonuses when you build in a symmetrical fashion. So it does actually influence the way you have your structure, where a lot of the times you're seeing me here have this symmetry built throughout. So I think that's a really nice nuance of Tlatoani. And yeah, I think, if that's all you wanted to hear, that gives you a gist of the game itself. I've been really enjoying it, not only from a gameplay loop perspective, but then also the way it brings the Mexica and Mesoamerican history to life. It's often underappreciated by the West just how developed these civilizations are. And I think having a city simulator where you can really dive into the nitty-gritties of that helps you really appreciate it. So that's it from a high-level overview. There's a ton more I could get into, but that's it. Again, super high level. Maybe the last thing to note would be the fact that there's all sorts of panels here. You can tweak even down to the level of the gods and how you're doing festivals for them, when in the calendar year, how large is your festival, who is the patron god. So again, I need to cut myself short, but I just wanted to give you a sense of this is the level of detail we're dealing with here. So if you want a really gritty city simulator with an awesome theme, this is the game for you. Check the link in the description. Otherwise, if you want to have a ride along of my experience of the game, we're going to pivot over to that now, and you'll see how I built this city. All right, let's start at the very beginning of things. So this is how you start the scenario. Just two structures to your name. You have a fortress and you have a trading post. At the very start of the game, you'll notice that your resources are quite limited. And so what's going to be happening in most of your scenarios as you start is going to be leveraging the trading post to interact with external parties to get access to resources that you want. That trade is going to cost you money. You have money here. So most scenarios are going to start you off with a fair amount of bank. So initially you're in a point where you're importing a lot of goods, and you can tell who might be potential trade partners by checking out here. So right now we're interacting with Tlacopan. You can see that you can import some goods and export goods by interacting with them. Over time, there'll be more cities that you can interact with, have different trading posts, and they have different preferences for what they can bring in and bring out. But yes, so that is the main kind of starting framework that you need to keep in mind. Is you're at a deficit, but you have coin, and so you're going to be importing a lot of goods. And your early state of the game is going to be trying to dig yourself out of that trade imbalance by locally producing goods. So obviously you're going to want to look around your map, and there's a handy resource here where you can look at fertility, you can look at deposits of materials, and you really want to assess, well, what direction do I want to take my construction in by toggling between these and seeing, in this case, maybe let's say that I have a lot of forest. Well, then I'm going to locally produce the forest, and I might tell my my trade post to no longer import forest. So I could say, put it on balance in this case. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it down. And then same thing for stone. We'll leave this up for now. Stone is something that we'll develop later. And yeah, we'll keep bringing in food. So the first thing is going to be turning off timber. And then obviously that's because I anticipate to locally produce timber. You'll see shortly there are buildings that allow us to do that. Obviously there's a lot of resource nodes here. But another quick way to get resources is what they're telling me to do here, which is the raise feature. So in that case, basically what you can do is you can highlight different areas, terrain, and it'll not only delete them to allow for construction, but also you go ahead and you regain a partial amount of the resources from what you're destroying. Not as efficient as if you actually had a dedicated building to extracting those resources, but it's a quick way to get some value there. So let's go ahead and just delete out all this stuff. and when we click play, our forces will go after that. To make things easier, what we'll also do is we're going to go ahead and build a mason yard, which will help with construction in a second. But just prior to that, what I probably want to do is build some quick, cheap, dirty roads. So we'll have those as our foreseeable expansion routes. So we'll have a road that gets out there, makes that easier for them. Same thing with these folks. Presumably, we're going to be going up the cliffside, and then I think this is a good direction to go because as we saw with construction, this has high fertility in this region. So we'll probably have some farms, maybe some more housing out here, and then where it's arid, probably some industry. So that's another aspect of the game which is important, is city planning in terms of looking at what resources are available in fertility, but also a symmetry feature, which we'll get into later. For now, let's go ahead and let things play out, let things people go about chopping down the resources that we're talking about. So you can see here, my villagers will automatically go about doing that. And then the resources that he has at his disposal, this porter, will probably be dropped off back in this trading post or other storage facilities that I have. And they'll start building my, my road network. So the game here wants me to build a mason yard. In this case, let's go ahead and get this started. We could probably put this at the corner. We want it relatively close to our trading post. So let's go ahead and have that probably here. That'll be one of our first buildings. And the mason yard basically is going to be helping to make it easier for you to build and repair your structures so people get employed here. And you want at least one of these. The range, I believe, is large, if not unlimited. So in theory, it can service and have staff that help with construction everywhere to make things a little bit more quick. But there are limitations for how much staff. So yes, the range may be very large, but in time, as you have a lot of construction taking place, you'll want more mason yards to have more masons and laborers at your disposal. So that's getting going. And let's go ahead and just fast forward as we finish construction and the raising of all these trees. So now that that's done, the game is going to be moving us on to building our housing and then our marketplace. And then pretty soon after that, we'll get into farms. So let's get started. So these are going to be the building panels that as we've already started to allude to. We'll probably want to plop down our large marketplace. I think in this case, yeah, having it next to the porter station there, or the trade post, is not bad. We'll have a lot of housing that can access that here shortly. Let's put the marketplace here. And now that that's done, we can go ahead and start to get into our housing. So artisanal housing is more for specified laborers. The peasant housing is what we'll start with probably soon because they're going to be allowing us to farm. So we'll do a mix of the two. In this case, they want us more artisan housing just to get started. So we'll make a little city block. And one of the things you'll want to do as you build out these houses is there are services that you'll install later. So it's probably a good idea to leave little gaps in your houses. And in this case, there are later gardens that you'll want to do. So I'm going to do a little pattern like this, leaving some gaps here and there for services that will be installed later. And this is something that you're just going to have to be acquainted with as you play the game more, is understanding what is relevant for leaving spaces. But generally, little gaps in the housing is useful, and then a grid like that. And what we can do also is we can now plop in our road, which will go around that. And we're probably cutting into a little bit of the fertile land, which isn't as efficient. These guys aren't necessarily going to be needed for farming, but we're going to go ahead and get into that now. So now we're going to have another city block. In this case, let's go ahead and actually frame up our market again as well, just to understand where we're going. Okay, and then for peasant housing, we're going to place it here where they're going to be able to do some farming around them, and eventually we'll have canals that'll bring water. So again, thinking ahead, we're going to want to leave a little bit of space. So let's do some of that. Probably space it out. Yeah. And yeah, let's go ahead and do 4 along this way. And you'll see actually as I move this house, the blue lights up, and that shows me really if I build the house here, with this road network, what are they having access to? So it's important for these people to still have access to get in over here and get access to the market for goods and all that. So I think we're still within range, so that's not bad. Now that's done, we have nothing to do at this point but fast forward and let our people get to work. So now we're going to be moving on to the next important thing, which is going to be building up our farms. This isn't necessarily the order you would want to do things if you're playing a random scenario, but we're following along the tutorial. So let's get in here, and they want me to build a granary. A granary is going to be something that stores food stuff, and obviously you're going to want it within range of where presumably you're going to have all your farms. So let's go ahead and put the granary here. Again, keeping in mind some of the symmetries. So let's build the road around this, the free road, just to help us keep in mind the framing of what we're doing here. And what we can also do is your granary should have space for 20 maize. And in this case, you want to be specific with these structures that you build. Sometimes you can build them and they are not going to perform what you would think they would do unless you tell them to do so. So there are some defaults, but you can have a lot of customization. So in this case, we're going to tell it to go get specific maize. So there's different modes here. Balance might be a mix between accept and get. In this case, it's going to be looking around for wherever maize is on the map and bringing it in here to try and have 20. So let's go ahead and pop that up to 20. So when we have surplus, it'll pull it in here. Now they're going to be telling us to build some farmland. So let's go ahead and get started. You can do these two in the beginning. Over time, you'll see as we expand the tutorial, and if you do a full scenario, there'll be a lot more crops. But in this case, it's just going to be maize and fruit trees. They behave differently. Maize grows quick and is a high yield crop that can be improved a lot with canals. But it's cheap and easy, and fruit trees are good for variety, good for aesthetics, which your citizenry cares about, but they're a bit particular. They don't want to be clustered too tight. So in this case, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and space them out like that. Have some little dividers between the properties. And we'll fill the difference with some maize. And now that we have our farmland going, now they're going to be telling us how to collect resources. So yeah, mostly sawyers to chop down trees. And yeah, we'll get into some of that. So in this case, if you have to go up a cliffside, there's actually the stone road, which will be important later for symmetry, plumbing, getting around easier, but it's an expensive resource. So in some cases, you want to be very judicious early on. In this case, it's going to be useful because it's going to allow us to actually go up the cliffside. So let's build some stairs there. And yeah, we'll probably build a couple of these just to allow access up the cliffs. Now, what we want to do after that is fast forward. People will build these, and then after that, we'll start to build our timber yards. All right, so let's build our sawyers, which are going to go up into the forest. And yeah, we'll place them down here. Place 2 of them. They'll get up into the woodland, and I could probably do more if I wanted to, but let's keep it at that. And let's go ahead and build some roads just to always maintain accessibility. And now they're going to be introducing us to some amenities that the citizens are going to care about. So in this case, well dippers, which you'll see basically help pull up well water to give hydration to your people. And then also it can help put out fires. And then sweepers are things that help keep the city clean. And then also the sweeper collects night soil, which is essentially poop, and helps turn it into fertilizer to be spread around. So let's go ahead and install those. So here we go. We can see these. So the well dipper is going to want to be in a position where it can service a lot of houses. So you can see here, in this case, it does spread around and hit most of my houses. The green one, there is no green dot down there until I bring it here. So you can see it wants to be centralized. In this case, I think this is probably okay. It gets to most of our houses, and we'll build another one down there in the future. But let's build one there. And then the sweeper is something that I said that gets the night soil. And in this case, this is why we left gaps in our houses so that later we can go ahead and build in some of these services. So let's plonk it here. You can see it gets access to all of these, which is really great. It's in a nice central location. And it looks like it is problematic for us that this house doesn't have access to the well dipper, at least for the tutorial's purposes. So this is a good way to show actually that you can relocate structures. So we had the well dipper here, and I can actually just relocate it for our purposes right at the intersection. So that'll make it happy. And let's go ahead and fast forward. All right, and now they're going to be moving us on to clay pits and kilns. So the purpose of that is going to be to produce these clay bricks. And so obviously you can see the direction that the tutorial is taking us. So far we built these sawyers to collect and produce timber. Then we made these farms to produce maize. So we've taken care of these first two resources, and then now they're moving us up the chain to do clay. So in this case, clay is going to require us to have clay pits and then kilns. So clay is to collect it. Kilns will then be to fire it and produce the bricks. And so these just need to be close to the water. So we're going to go ahead and put this in this muddy area, and we'll have some facilities. Probably something like, let's see, it'll save room for our farm. So we'll place a couple of them down like this. Perfect, like that. And yeah, we'll have some kilns in just a second. But as always, it's good measure to just come ahead and connect some of these so you can remember kind of the grid spacing that you're trying to plan out. Let's do some of that. And eventually we'll also pull this water into do canals, so the use of these gaps is still useful. And then otherwise, let's go ahead and have a row of kilns. And like I said, those are going to be firing them. So in this case, yeah, we can just put them, might as well just do 1-to-1. And then now that we're on the way to producing these facilities, what they want us to do is actually obviously connect them to roads. So in this case we have, but I'm just gonna do that for good measure. And yeah, let's go ahead and fully surround them. It's not necessary, but in this case we're just gonna do that. And then what they want us to do is actually go here and go into commerce and trade and build a porter yard. This is a very important function of the game, where basically porter yards are places where you can stockpile materials, and it also has staff that is going to be used to move those materials around. So in this case, let's go ahead and yeah, let's put them a little bit further away just to leave room for other facilities, but we'll put them right there. And now that that's built, what we want to do also is tell this one to go ahead and start collecting raw materials. So let's get, yeah, it'll accept clay. And yeah, we can actually tell it to accept excess pottery, which is what we're going to be producing in this area. And then it's going to be storing kind of this excess material here from these facilities as these move over. And then eventually they're going to be moving into our trading post. And what they're trying to tell us here is, well, let's tell our trading post to accept pottery because that is going to be one of the major kind of refined goods into a nice product that you can export to then start to actually get some coinage back. Because you saw the main dynamic that was taking place here is we were at a deficit for material. We had to buy a bunch of goods. Now we've weaned ourselves off by producing materials locally. And then you can flip the tables by now exporting goods and building back up your bank. So that's the way the tutorial is taking you. So now let's go ahead and fast forward. And one of the things that I'm still getting used to is, again, balancing the needs of these different facilities. So if we click on one of these, you get a little warning that says what it needs. Obviously, it's going to need clay and timber in this case. Timber is produced all the way over there. So what we can tell it to do is actually, I want you to actually go ahead and start getting timber. So again, get is going to give it a preference to look for other storage facilities and start collecting it, using its porters to bring them and stockpile them here, so that in this case, these facilities can then draw from them. So now we're getting to the next stage, that we have our production up and running, which is what I was talking about, which is essentially, now that we have this nice good, we can go to our trading post, and it wants us to accept up to 12 pieces of pottery. So we'll, yeah, well, actually I want it to accept, and yeah, up to 12. And now we're going to be covering more amenities. They're going to start talking about us meeting the needs of the gods, which is a whole other aspect of the game we haven't quite gotten into yet, but they're going to be wading us into. And yeah, the idea here is you have, at this point in your scenario, probably met some of your basic needs. You're starting to produce goods, you're trading them, you're going to get money. One thing we haven't done yet is stone, which in this case, we're going to be relying on the trade post to import it, but in the future we'll get into tapping that resource. But for now, let's go ahead and deal with the gods. So it's telling us that these homes have everything they need, except that at this point, the tutorial tells us they need to worship the gods, and they need some civic amenities. So in this case, let's go ahead and make a school, and again we can see how much it can service. And if I put it here, it looks like that gets to everything, so let's go ahead and place that as our school center. And the other thing that they need is going to be a shrine. So these do have boons for you. If I have a shrine to Tlaloc, that is going to be one that has boons for agriculture. So in that case, we might as well put it here. And this is where the game does have this system of symmetry, which is why we're trying to be in a regular kind of grid-based pattern. And let's go ahead and put it, yeah, where we have something good. And it's not locked in initially. You can always change and update that in the future. So let's go ahead and put it here. And you can shift your materials around, but that's pretty good symmetry, at least on one side, and it'll continue to improve over time. So he's there, and then let's go ahead, and Huitzilopochtli is going to be the god, I think the main Mexica god, who is mostly martial in nature. In this case, we're training our youth over here anyways for martial education, so as a reminder of that, we might as well give them a warlike structure. Yeah, I think that's not bad, and we'll go ahead and we'll probably improve that over time. Maybe there'll be 2 schools actually next to it. And yeah, we'll go ahead and place this and improve the symmetry in the future. In this case, there is a cheap and easy way to provide symmetry for your structures, and that's going to be through building stone roads. That does count. So in this case, we're going to make a little bit of stone road for our structure here. It's going to not only provide access, but also boost some of the symmetry. All right, and now that we've done that, we're on to the next step of making our people happy. So in this case, it's going to be an alcove, which gets to kind of the entertainment needs of our people. So in this case, an alcove is just a place where drummers, flutists, other musicians can show up. And once more, you can see it's important to see kind of who it accesses. So in this case, it looks like we're having a bunch of services kind of down here in the middle. And for now, it looks like that's not a bad place. Let's see. Yeah, that only services half. So let's keep it centralized. This is a good place for kind of amenities to start to be put in. And now again, let's fast forward and let things get built. So now the tutorial is telling us that the next stage is going to be growth and stability. That's going to be all about having the needs of your people met. So you can see the houses here are starting to fill up and they're pretty happy. They lack a couple materials, but as production does queue up and we get up and running, they're going to be full. The houses are going to start to upgrade themselves and we'll have more expansion over time. And the end goal of this little portion of the tutorial is to actually start to turn a profit for a year. And yeah, that's what we'll be doing here, is scaling up our stuff and making it into a proper, respectable city. So a couple things are in order for cleaning up. The first is going to be the idea that we wanted to have a little bit of a porter yard up here so that as we produce some of these materials and in the future there'll be stone, we do want someone whose job it is to kind of collect that stuff and redistribute it. So we might as well put that little porter yard here. And we'll tell it that if it's going to stockpile any materials, it might as well be, yeah. Put it on a balance for, no, just accept for now. It'll bring in some timber as we get excess, and then they can, like I said, shuffle it around. The granary is going to be accepting the maize, so we don't need it to handle that. So really, that'll be it. And then eventually, when we do get stone, yeah, that'll be a good place for it to start stockpiling some of that stuff. Cool. So in case that's pretty good, and yeah, these structures are going to be built out. I think what we start to do is probably keep an eye out for, yeah, if we want to make more money. Actually, this is one thing we might do, is take a look at our finances. You could see that we lost a lot of money this past year. But as we get into next year, it'll start to right the ship now that we have pottery and exports. And now that we've stopped with a lot of construction, or at least slowed, our balance sheet should turn out a bit better. So let's go ahead and play. All right, so at this point we've done a time skip. I just wanted to show a little bit of development of what we've done. I'll slow things down here slightly. So essentially, I wanted to build up our production. It turned out that a lot of our homes that the tutorial wanted us to basically get upgraded needed more pottery. So to do that, I had to do a couple things to make them happy to then want to evolve into, as you can see here, artisanal home. That's the kind of lowest level, and it just got upgraded into a small house once its needs were met and a certain amount of time went forward. So how did I do that? Well, the first thing is I just wanted more pottery. So we needed more materials for our kilns. One of that is going to be timber. And looks like our peasant house has caught fire. If you look around, it looks like that's a house here that's on fire, but it's right next to a well dipper, so that should be addressed. So none too worried about that. We'll put this on play. Yeah, that fire will be addressed here in a second, I'm hoping. And there you go, the fire has been put out. So back to our train of thought, I needed more pottery, so to do that, I had more sawyers to produce timber, I had more clay pits, more kilns to produce all that stuff, and then to make sure that it was properly distributed across the houses, what I did is I reduced our pottery exports, and then I set up, oh, it looks like we're getting more fires, so that's unfortunate. But then what I ended up doing also to make sure that the pottery made its way around here is when I expanded our housing and our farmyards, I made sure that there was porter yards that were getting the pottery to make sure that the labor here pooled it in this case. And once it's pooled in these various nodes, that's going to be important because then the market can actually go ahead and pull the pottery from this local area. The market, I believe, does not have the ability to independently run all the way down here and get pottery. So you really need to have a local depot that's fetching these materials to then bring it to the market, to then bring it to your people. So that was kind of some of the keys to our success. And then other things that I alluded to that we did was expanding out our agriculture. And you can see here, the boons are actually making it all the way out to the peasantry, where some of these places on the fringes are going to be still peasant huts, but the ones closer to our interior that have their needs met are now going to be large cottages. So overall, things are going good. We're heading towards the end of the year, and our finances are super strong, positive balance, so we should meet the needs of the tutorial here. So there we go, we finished the first part of the settlement tutorial. We'll go ahead and go into a little bit of the next one just to give you a sense of what advanced city building looks like. And yeah, let's keep going. So now at this next stage, it looks like they want us to have more sources of food. So there's going to be hunters' lodges. My understanding of hunters' lodges is you can place them, close to your settlement, and then the hunters will go out and they will find game wherever it is, so they can travel any distance. Obviously, you want to be cognizant of what's efficient, and it looks like this is really nice. Actually, we have a little local forest and some game in this area, so we might as well create a little hunter's lodge here. That'll be really convenient. We'll create one there, and they want a second hunter lodge, so I think we should probably have, where is their game? You could probably assume that there'll be some game in the forest. Yeah, it looks like there's some here. So we'll put a hunter's lodge, probably, at the edge of our little structure here. So let's do that. Great. And then they want us to get to canals here, so we'll do that in a second. I'll talk about chinampas, but for now, let's go ahead and just be really nice and polished and make sure that the structures that we build do have access to our road networks. So that'll be constructed. Make sure that that kind of wraps around. So cool, we have that. And then this one is tapping into our existing little infrastructure, and let's just make sure that that's there. Cool. Another thing to note for hunters' lodges is as you get people working in those lodges, I do believe it creates warriors, because these are people with, weapons, bows and spears. So as you get into the military phase of things, these guys can be relevant. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to the chinampa discussion. So farming and food, down in here, we're gonna find a new structure. This is gonna be the canals. So canals are gonna be ways to bring water for irrigation of your plants. So at this point, you can see that it says irrigated is no. So the growth is 58, fertility is 50. We can super, oh, look at this one. This one even has low growth, 12%. So yeah, we can get that way up by having a canal that brings in water. So that will just have to start somewhere. So in this case, let's have it come down the center, which is why we created this in the first place. So in this case, we'll have it where it comes just all the way and services both of our farms. In the future, we'll keep this alley open so that it can actually go further. And I think that's what we'll do. We'll have this intersection, and then yeah, it'll go all the way until it grabs the water. I I think it just needs to make it to here, I believe is my my understanding. And yep, look at that. So you can confirm by clicking on these tiles. Swamps allow for an irrigation, so this will be able to feed our canal. And then the other thing we can go ahead and check here is just talk a little bit about what else you can do. Chinampas are ways that you can actually create floating gardens. So eventually you may think that we run out of land and we want to build on the swampy marshes. Chinampas are a way for you to go ahead and build over this and reclaim the land. Another thing that they'll probably get us into shortly is going to be the maguey beds, but we'll give that a sec. And for now, let's just go ahead and yeah, get to the irrigated fields and the meat. Excellent. Now on to the next piece. So this is going to be more types of crops. This one is interesting. Maguey is one that grows in more desertified areas. So it doesn't want to be near canals. So if we go ahead and actually check the irrigation level, yeah, irrigation is good, but also fertility. These areas here that are drier and not as good are probably good for our maguey. So dry terrain away from your canals. So this is probably a good place to grow the crop here. And yeah, I think we'll go ahead and do that. Source of fiber, and you'll see soon that we can make breweries and start to make cloth, which will make our people happy, more exports, all that kind of good stuff. So let's go ahead and yeah, go start building that stuff. So our maguey beds can come in here. I think in this case, we could say that let's make these houses here are going to wrap up their production, some of this, and it means we'll just have to be careful when we go ahead and we put in our canals that we don't want to connect them too close here. But the beds will be 32 plots. So I think we have enough there. And actually we may anticipate that there'll be more in the future. So let's pop that up, and we'll probably have some more peasant housing soon. And now that we have this anticipated production of all this maguey, what we can actually do is start to get a little brewer's lane set up in a cloth weaver's lane. I think in our case, let's go ahead and yeah, put this right at the corner. This will have access to all the markets, etc. Let's make a couple of these bad boys. And then might as well make some breweries. They want at least one. I think it's always good to go a little bit overboard with the breweries. And then for all this storage material, we might want to make another porter yard because this one is mostly dedicated to, you know, timber. Later it'll be stone. So let's go ahead and make another one so that we can store the materials of the weaving and all that. So now that we have a new industry in place, producing cloth and pulque, these are things that other parties might be interested in, which is why the tutorial is now teeing us up to go into the campaign map view to see other entities, and now we've unlocked another city-state. So in this case, previously we were talking through Tlacopan. Trade in this case, as you saw earlier, was us importing a bunch of, you know, simple stuff that propped up our industry early. We shut those down and we were exporting to them things like pottery and fruit, but we didn't have anywhere to offload our new materials. So in this case, you can see the traders that were going to Tlacopan, but what we wanted to do is actually now have Azcapotzalco, where we can open up trade and potentially conquer and do other things, but for now open up trade in order to start sending them stuff which we just produced, which is the pulque. So other sources and cloth as well, other ways to get money. And you can see if we have a lot of pulque, this will get us 200, which is even more than the pottery. So that is going to be a good deal. It does cost some money to open up, but it'll definitely be worth it for us. So we've done that. And then once that's done, you actually need a dedicated trading post for each of your new trade partners. Each one can only deal with a single trade partner. So in order to get that done, we're going to go ahead and create a trading post. And we might as well put it here, which is going to be our center for new industry. I think that makes sense. And to keep things compact, we might as well just put it, yeah, we can put it like that. I guess in the interior, we may eventually put houses or other things. So we'll put it there. And then what we can do here is trade for them is going to be the new one, Azcapotzalco. And in this case, we can go ahead and export some pulque and some cloth. We'll keep it relatively low to allow it to filter out to our people. And then once that's done, yeah, then we can ramp this up. So yeah, let's jump ahead for when this is complete. So now that we've set up our second trade partner, the tutorial assumes that we're going to be basically having a lot of cash, and now it's worth investing in clean water and a lot more infrastructure that are more high tier for our city. And in this case, as you can see here, it's going to be a cistern, which you have to find a source. You create this first cistern, an aqueduct, and then you connect it to a second cistern that'll be running in your city. So in order to do that, it's going to be using a lot of stone. So now finally we do get access to the stone building, which we'll do that in a second. So here's our stone quarry. This is something that you should take note of. Previously in the tutorial, we weren't able to get stone, so you can get stuck. You would previously, if you wanted to get stone, you'd have to use the raise tool to erase some stone and get some residuals, or you'd have to trade for it. So that can trip you up if you have your build queue a little bit wrong. You can get stuck and it's not clear. But now finally we get the stone quarry, which is, as you'd expect, something that allows you to tap into stone. But in a regular scenario, you wouldn't be limited or gated in the same way as a tutorial. So in a regular scenario, it's pretty easy to get stone if you have the resources for it. So there's stone up in these hills. Let's go ahead and build one of our structures. I think we can fit 2 here, so that'll be nice. Boom. They'll go into there. And if we wanted more stone, supersize it, we have another square. Boom. So this is really intensive industry, which is why we have this porter yard. And already we told it to go ahead, and we can actually reduce this, but already we told it to go ahead and accept stone, accept timber, which is nearby, and accept meat, which was coming in from over here. So I think that's all good. I could probably turn the meat off, make more room for accepting stone, accepting timber. And yeah, that's probably good. And the reason I turned off meat is we now have a new porter yard, which is closer to this guy. So we can go ahead and have him actually accept some meat. Cool. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get stone going. We'll fast forward and then we'll get ahead and we'll build our cistern system. And now jumping ahead, you can see that we're done with our stone quarries. They're going to be collecting stone from the nearby hills. We have a lot of these outcrops. That's all fine and dandy for us. And you can see our stone here is going to start to be climbing up. So I think we could probably start planning to have our cistern. In this case, the source is going to be up here. So let's go ahead and place this bad boy. So you can see it needs to be green. So that, that means we're tapping into that resource. We'll click it here. And then after that, we'll build an aqueduct. So this is going to be a super long piece of infrastructure that's going to run down. And you can see you run into some issues with the swamp, but that's fine. You actually have these causeways which allow you to help bridge over these tricky passages. Obviously it gets expensive, but we're at the point in time where I think we can afford it. Jumping ahead, you can see my cistern network is now completed. I did want to note that I had run into one little hiccup, which was connecting the cistern to this freshwater spring. I had an issue where it was a little bit too far. It seems like it was connected, but it looks like the issue was it really had to be touching this node here. So it can be a little bit finicky, so be aware that if your cistern doesn't fill up with water, it could be just the connection point. So that's now been fixed. But yes, once that is done, the tutorial is going to be moving us forward. So now it's going to be a question of what are you going to do with your water supply now that you have a big cistern? Well, the idea is you put up plumbing, and the way this is done is you actually have roads that connect it to the well dippers, and you'll see that here. So I can build my road, stone road, and making this connection to this guy here will actually allow plumbing to run along that route. And I believe now if we do this, it'll actually run all the way through these homes and make sure that they get plumbing as well. So now that we've upgraded the roads in this area, you can see that it runs a cistern connection over to the well dipper. The well dipper, now that it does have pipes, is going to itself be upgraded. And yeah, that'll eventually increase the amount of plumbing that goes into our northern area. And eventually, if we do need to extend water, yeah, you can see it's working its way along these routes. And if we do need to bring water, we can build another cistern down here and connect it with an aqueduct. But yes, now that we have water here, we can do more interesting things with our amenities. One of them is going to be gardeners and small gardens. So again, this is why it was important to leave these little patches in the structures, because now we can stick on a little garden here. So a gardener can tend to those facilities there. A gardener can tend to these facilities here. And then let's go ahead and add small gardens in that area that he can go ahead and service. And now that we have a gardener and these gardens, these are going to be pretty important because it means that we can now have an herbalist, which is going to see to the medical needs of your society. And they need to gather those herbs from the garden. So it's actually pretty perfect. And I think we can place him right here so that he can access gardens on both sides. That's not a bad spot. And while we're at it, we might as well install some sweet large gardens to make people here happy and make our herbalist in particular very happy that he'll have some gardens. And now that the herbs have been gathered, it looks like the tutorial is moving us on to the tippy top of the social hierarchy here, the noble housing that it wants us to now take care of. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of that. So finally, we have a noble compound. This is going to be elite citizens, and they need access to a lot of amenities, including even labor. So they're going to want a really nice area. And I think we've already built a really nice, actually natural spot for these people to be in. So let's go ahead and just put 2 of them here. Actually, maybe on either side of this temple could be really cool. So let's put 1 here. Yeah, that's actually much better. So let's go ahead and put those 2 there, flanking the temple. And then what I'm imagining is as this grows out, we'll have an even larger set of supporting houses and more facilities. So now that we have those there, let's go ahead and take a look at other things. We could even build a plaza right out front. Average symmetry. So we're slowly expanding this to make it more and more symmetrical. I really like this whole area as it's built out. So let's just make a plaza. That'll be nice. And some of these little stelas, which can help just with the ambiance. I like those being by kind of the herbalist. So we are flush with cash. Let's make some there. And that'll kind of demarcate the start of our really awesome city center. And yeah, as all this is going on, we'll let construction take place. We'll build these facilities. But one of the things we haven't been tending to is the population. So 157 pop here. Lots of young people that are coming into the city. And it looks like we're going to need a new housing expansion. So we could have more farms if we wanted to, but I think we're doing pretty well in terms of maize, and I think our granary is probably topped off. Yeah, pretty well. Let's actually have it start to accept meat and other things and start stockpiling just in case we get hit with something bad. But yeah, otherwise I think we can start building in some more of these houses for the commoners. And in order to do that, let's go ahead and make sure that we have the noble houses. I think they should be fully surrounded here. And then let's go in and populate a new grid of the artisan houses. Amazing. So now that we have the noble compound and we have a lot more of these facilities for newcomers and new generations, it looks like finally we're going to be at the highest tier of our structures. We can actually build grand temples to Huitzilopochtli, big plazas, and it looks like to ordain some of the decorations here, we're going to have to need some goldsmiths. So let's get into some of those final little commodities. So it looks like goldsmiths here, magnificent works. I like them being part of our kind of commerce section here. And especially, I believe they are going to be needing kind of raw gold, which is why it's nice to have our little collector here. So let's put the gold right by this little sentry block to protect it. So he will be constructed. And then the other thing it looks like it wants us to build is these giant temples. So I like the idea of Huitzilopochtli is all about this area. So we can give him a giant, oh my god, this thing is freaking huge. So I think it makes sense to put Tlaloc down here for all the agricultural focus folks. And then for our main city center, we're going to be having blood for the blood god and put a really nice symmetry temple to Huitzilopochtli right down in the center. So now that our 2 major temples have been completed, it looks like we're on to gods and festivals. So we'll take a look at that. And this is where you can see there's a ton of different festivals during the year that you can toggle on and off. And they can be attributed to different deities. And the whole idea here is that you can get the favor of different gods that will give you different boons, etc. So all super detailed, and all of that will require a pretty significant upkeep in terms of not only having priests and offerings, but also potentially having sacrifices at these various places, and all of that eventually leads us on to the military aspect, which will come later. But at this point, I think we've done enough of an introduction so you get a sense of how the city building goes. And yes, you could see how I did a little bit more detailing over the city here, and naturally how it's growing organically. So for instance, when I placed the structure in the Temple to Tlaloc, I decided to make a big garden area, lots of gardener buildings, herbalists to see to my people when they get sick, another minor temple, lots of beautiful gardens. The canal comes nicely through here. And in anticipation of this happening, I've actually extended my cistern network to draw in water. We now have piping that's filling out this part of the population, and this is going to be really nice. So eventually this could be another noble or artisan compound. And meanwhile, over here, I've started to build some chinampas, which you can see are reclaiming the land, with the anticipation of building out this major urban center out into the swamps, as was done with Tenochtitlan. So yeah, you can see the direction this is going. So far, I really like it, and I definitely recommend that you check it out for yourself. So links in the description, and enjoy.